Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Waseem here from Handsome Smiles. Today we're going to be looking at top 5 oud fragrances to consider. So this is going to be a part 2 list. I did part 1 of top 5 oud fragrances to consider back in I think 2015. So a long time ago. So since then I've been testing way more fragrances, so I'm doing a updated list. So the 5 fragrances I'm going to be listing today, they're not in any particular order, and I'm just going to quickly run through each of them. If you want a really in-depth review from myself for any of these fragrances, I'm going to be listing the names of each of the fragrances in the description below with a link to my review as well. So each of these 5 fragrances have been reviewed on my channel. So starting off at number 5 is a fragrance from the house of YSL, and that fragrance is M7. This is a cult classic, guys. When it was first released by YSL, it was actually a flop, and it was only really in the last 5 to 10 years with the internet and us fragrance enthusiasts buying this that this has now gained a cult following. It was actually the second fragrance to be released by Tom Ford when he was working at YSL at the time as the creative director. So what does M7 smell like? Essentially, it's a really smooth rosewood with a sweet cherry accord and some tobacco, which is then introduced to a lovely amber accord in the dry down, which gives it a very resinous feel. It's a very smooth woody scent with those other qualities giving it some sweetness. The oud in this, it's not like any oud that I've smelled in any other fragrance. It's not skanky, it's not barnyard, it's not fecal. It's actually a very accessible scent. However, there is a lot of like a subtle Middle Eastern quality, and has like a mysterious quality as well. Maybe the noses at the time of this fragrance was released weren't expecting a fragrance like this, but really I find it to be quite an accessible scent. In terms of performance, M7, for me, I get about 10 to 12 hours of longevity. Projection is excellent for the first 5 hours, but after that it sits a little bit more close to the skin in the moderate range, but you do still have a really nice scent cloud around you. In terms of seasons, I think this is best suited to fall and winter, and for me I would personally use this as a date scent or as a formal scent. At number 4 is a fragrance from the house of Diptyque, and that fragrance is Oud Palao. So Oud Palao gets a lot of comparisons to Christian Dior's Oud Ispahan, and there are notable differences for me. I've gone into detail a lot more in my review, but essentially what does Diptyque Oud Palao smell like? So for me it opens up quite dark, quite slightly skanky, but then it's also really smooth, and it's really resinous as well, and it's super rich. In the opening, it's all about the oud for me. The oud is, for me, very natural smelling. It's really deep, it's really dark, it's really rich. And as the fragrance develops, it's joined by this gorgeous wet rose. And as the fragrance dries down, it's all about the oud and the rose. And it has in the dry down, it's then introduced to a vanilla as well, which sweetens the rose even more. Overall, for me, this is a very strong fragrance. It's more about the oud than anything else, with the rose and the vanilla being lovely backing players. A very Middle Eastern sort of feeling scent as well. The main differences that I get from Oud Palao, Diptyque's Oud Palao to Dior's Oud Ispahan is that Oud Ispahan, the oud is more dusty and dry, whereas the oud in Oud Palao, I find it's more rich, and it's slightly sweeter and creamier due to the note of the vanilla. And the rose in Oud Ispahan is this like really wet rose, whereas the rose in Oud Ispahan is a little bit leaning more on the sweeter side and more of the resinous side, again maybe due to the vanilla. In terms of performance, Oud Palao from the Diptyque is a monster. I get excellent longevity, around 12 hours, with really strong projection. This one really screams off your skin. In terms of seasons, this is best suited to evening wear during the fall and the winter, and it's best suited to formal occasions. And number 3 is a fragrance from the house of Christian Dior, and the one that we're talking about is Leather Oud. So Leather Oud, this is a very animalic and skanky fragrance. It opens up, like I've said, animalic, dark, really slightly wet. You get some dirty accords as well, very light dirty accords. It's a huge blast of civet. Civet is an animalic note from a civet cat, and you also get a little bit of muskiness, which you get from the French labdanum. And with all those notes, in the background you get some smokiness as well, which is coming from the note of the birch. The opening, a lot of people will find it quite off-putting. Myself, I find it very challenging. However, as the fragrance develops onto your skin and into the dry down, it's then the dirtier animalic dark notes from the opening are slightly subdued because of two notes it's introduced to. That is the amber and most notably the beeswax. These add a sweet, resinous smoothness to the scent, and the fragrance actually becomes quite pleasing. Along with the amber and the beeswax in the dry down, you also get a really notable note of clove, which adds a lot of spiciness to the fragrance, and the musk and the civet in the dry down for me a little bit eased out, and they come across like a lovely leather. Even with this sweetness and the smooth resinous feel that you get in the dry down of leather oud, the dirtiness and the animalicness that you get from the opening is still present, and it kind of gets higher and lower as the fragrance develops onto your skin. In terms of performance, leather oud is a really outstanding performer. I get around 10 to 12 hours of longevity, with projection in the first 4 hours being really strong, after that being quite moderate but still a very strong scent cloud around you. I think this is a fragrance for yourself to enjoy more than anything else, but it does also have like a luxurious high-end quality to it as well, so it can work as a formal scent. So that was Leather Oud by Christian Dior. At number 2 is a fragrance from the house of Zegna. The fragrance I'm talking about is Indonesian Oud. So Indonesian Oud was a fragrance which really shocked me. This again is a very animalic, really skanky and funky scent. It opens up for me really skanky, but then it's introduced to a really strong wet rose as well, and into the dry down it's then introduced to a patchouli, which adds a lot of earthiness. I said in my review that the earthiness that you get from the patchouli added with the oud and the rose gives it a feeling that you're actually walking through a rainforest. You know, you're in Cambodia or you're in Thailand, and you're like walking when it's just rained in the rainforest, and the smell of the earth is what I get in the dry down. There's part of this fragrances which I said in my review that it comes across like a wet carpet. Like, it has that wet carpet sort of feel. It's a very skanky, funky, animalic oud fragrance, but it's slightly balanced out by the rose. In terms of performance, again, this one is excellent on my skin. I found it lasted on my skin around 10 to 12 hours. Projection was a weird one. I felt like it wasn't screaming off my skin, but I was getting a lot of notices and actually was complimented quite a lot on this fragrance as well, which was a bit of a surprise. I find it quite skanky on my skin, but the compliments that I was getting, and I got some compliments at work as well, which were quite positive actually. They did mention the rose a lot, but on my skin I felt like I was getting the oud a lot more. This one is perfect for fall and winter as an evening time scent. Personally, I would wear this to the mosque, but you can also wear it formally as well. I think that's an excellent choice, and I'd wear it casually for your enjoyment as well. So at number 2, that was Indonesian Oud. At number 1 is a fragrance from the house of Tom Ford from their private blend collection, and that fragrance is what's Plum Japonais. Guys, I completely forgot the name there. Plum Japonais from the house of Tom Ford from the private collection. This is one of the most beautiful, most accessible, most pleasing to the nose oud fragrances you're going to find. It's not a skanky fragrance like Leather Oud or Indonesian Oud. For me, the note that really helps to make this really pleasing to nose is the note of the plum. This fragrance starts off with a blast of wetness that I get, and it's really fruity. It's the note of the plum, which is just like water-like in the opening, and with that plum in the opening you get that really woodiness of the oud, which is always in this scent in the background. I find the plum is at the forefront of this scent, and along with that oud you also get some cinnamon as well, which adds a lovely warmness. There's also a touch of incense, adding a lovely smokiness to the fragrance as well. As the fragrance dries down, the oud is still present, but it's very much in the background. Plum is at the center stage. However, in the dry down, it gets introduced to the note of the saffron, which just adds a beautiful warm spiciness, and adds like a Middle Eastern quality as well. Absolutely really beautiful, really well made scent, and really accessible as well. This one is a fragrance which would suit both men and women, and personally I would wear this as a formal scent, as a night out scent, and I would recommend it as a date fragrance as well. On my skin, in terms of performance, this lasts about 10 to 12 hours with really good projection for the first 6 to 8 hours. After that, it sits a little bit more closer to the skin. But really, Tom Ford's Plum Japonais is by far the most accessible oud fragrance I've tried, and one of the most pleasing as well due to the fruity nature. So at number 1 was Plum Japonais. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, you can check out a review from myself where I do a little bit more in-depth into the sense of each of these fragrances. Links to those reviews will be in my description below. Guys, please do leave a comment and a like below, and make sure to subscribe as well. Until next time, see you later.